Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Reverend Patrick Dolan, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And so with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And we want to talk about anything that you're working on for today and or tomorrow, okay?
Yes, sir.
Excited to have you here, sir. So tell us where you were born.
Well, I was actually born in an orphanage.
Orphanage
hospital, which was like a huge version of what we call a baby box today.
Yeah.
In 1949. Yes, I'm old as dirt. And I actually remember who made the dirt, you know. So I was.
Where was the orphanage hospital located?
It was called St. Vincent's, and it was in downtown Chicago. It's been closed many years because of legal developments and all the other kinds of things with that. Yeah. But basically, parents would come, have the baby, leave the baby with the nuns, and they would then call whatever was on the list of the next family that had signed up for one. Right. And people would be vetted a little bit, we call it, and check to see if they were good families and all that kind of thing. Yeah. So I know really nothing about my blood family other than I suspect they were college students and knew they couldn't raise a baby. Yeah. I suspect my dad probably would have been on the GI Bill from World War II. Yeah. Coming back and doing that. The one little story we have from the nuns is I had a grandfather who was a physician who was eager that I get put in a good Catholic family. So I suspect he knows about that now. Yeah. He'd be probably about 150 at this point or something. Right. But the one regret I have is that I never was able to contact them and let him know when I was being ordained. Because he would have loved that kind of experience and stuff. Yeah. However, I was adopted by a wonderful family who had tried for 10 years to have children and not been successful. And my dad's name was Roy Dolan. My mother's name was Mary Alice O'Connell. They were going to name me Patrick all along. And their Irish relatives talked them out of it. Wow. They said, it's a little too Irish. You just don't want to force that down his throat and stuff. So even though I was born in February, they weren't sure I was going to live. Oh. So the parents didn't get a call until March 17th that there was a baby boy available. And so the parents said, relatives be damned, we're going to call him Patrick anyway.
It's St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's the day they got the call.
They were able to come and get me for another 10 days because of there was an epidemic of dysentery in the hospital.
Oh, gotcha.
In 1949, the drugs were not what they are today, and a lot of babies died. So they wanted to make sure I was going to be alive. And that's why they waited so long before contacting the parents. They didn't want to have to call them back and say, no, you can't come, the baby died. That just wasn't going to work real well if people had been waiting for 10 years for a baby. Yeah,
so, that's true. Wow, so what an amazing story. I love that.
That starts things out, and it goes a little stronger from there and stuff. I can't say I grew up because it's still a work in progress. People who know me know that all too well.
I love that. That is really
I lived cool. During grade school years west of Chicago. Outside our back gate was part of the Illinois Prairie. And things like that. It was a far, far western suburb, you might say. The next parish over was in the Joliet Diocese, and the next one beyond that was in the Rockford Diocese. So I've been Catholic all my life, baptized as an infant, and very happy with it. And in grade school, I got the inclination that I might be called to priesthood. but I knew with a seventh grader's certainty that it wasn't to the Archdiocese of Chicago, and it wasn't. But at that time, you're living still at home in grade school. If you don't have a vocation to where your parents are living, it means you must have a vocation to some religious order doing missionary work somewhere.
Right.
So I spent years studying for a missionary community.
Okay.
Now, that structure is that you usually go through an area of what they call postulancy. Nuns do that too, usually only for a few months and stuff like that. But in our case, we were supposed to be postulants all through high school, and it was a high school seminary, boarding school, things like that. It was a lot like military basic training, only we didn't salute. We made the Sign of the Cross a lot, but we didn't salute, so it's similar kinds of things.
I got you.
Went through 4 years of high school seminary, at the end of which we were supposed to go to a novitiate. And after that, we'd stop being postulants and go on and then take vows and stuff. Well, they moved the novitiate at that point. It was right after the Second Vatican Council, and the community wasn't sure what their future was going to be like, so they didn't want to try and push people through something if they were unsure. So they said, we'll move the novitiate till after 2 years of college. We got to 2 years of college. They moved it to after 4 years of college. So I've been a postulant for 8 years at that point instead of a few months.
And they kept moving the goalpost on you.
I kept moving the goalpost. I mean, I was pushing to the goalpost, and it kept getting further and further away. But I mean, it was still pretty good. I was studying particularly for the Missionary Sons of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, known as the Claretians, in the Chicago metropolitan area. Very good people. They did a lot of campus ministry work at that time. And I was kind of being trained for that, to do these Newman centers and things. And that's why I majored in chemistry. And I loved it. I took a course in chemistry my first year in college because we didn't have any in high school. I fell in love with it. I just thought it was the coolest thing you could do, except for the explosions, and even they were all right.
Got to blow stuff up. Come on now.
Turn colors and bubble and do all kinds of fun stuff.
And you're in your early 20s and you're bulletproof. Let's be honest, right?
Exactly. Well, instead of going to the novitiate, the community decided that there were only 3 of us left out of 70 that had started minor seminary in high school. And they thought the other 2 of them would do fine in novitiate. They thought I was too pious. So they suggested I go out in the world and do other things, and went to graduate school because they didn't want me going into the army right at that point. The community had become a little bit anti-war, Vietnam kind of thing, and a little bit anti-military. And they didn't want a chemistry major graduate from college being sent to the army. That was just not their thought would be a good thing from their perspective.
Well,
I thought it was a cool idea.
It's the time, right?
I eventually did some of that. I didn't ever go to Vietnam in the military. I went back there later on, but the Vietnam War came and went while I was in 15 years of seminary training. So, but I spent 4 times in Iraq and made up for it.
There you go. So just a quick question for you. So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up outside of Chicago?
One of the wonders of the Chicago downtown area, it was safe enough for kids, even in junior high, to take the bus to the train to downtown, go to the museums and things like that. Some of the history, a lot of the architecture, and particularly it had 2 zoos, and it had great botanical gardens. The education was really quite good. Chicago Museum of Science and Industry is world class, probably one of the best in the world. The Art Institute is spectacular. And I had an uncle who actually was the art director for the Chicago Association of Commerce and Industry. I'd meet him for lunch, and we'd go over there for a half hour or something like that. And it was really neat. They had great facilities there to learn from, and it was safe.
Wow.
You didn't really have to worry about anybody getting in the way. Not only were there police around, but there were a lot of good citizens that wouldn't let bad things happen. It was a place that if you wanted to work and you were decent, you could succeed. in that area, no matter what color your skin was, no matter what language you spoke, no matter what your background was, no matter what your religion was.
Yeah.
You were accepted there, and it was as long as you were willing to work and you were willing to do a day's work for a day's pay and live in the community. It was a pretty good place. It really was.
Sounds like a wonderful time.
Yeah.
Sounds like a wonderful time. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Ugh, that's a good question. I had a lot of good friends and family and things like that. Uh, this is going to sound really hokey, but I have to say God was, because I was an altar boy and I was in the boys' choir and things like that. And when I had kind of an experience on Halloween evening in seventh grade that I might want to be a priest, it's like God was shaking me and saying, "You're not listening to me." So that was the influence that I can tell you about. There wasn't a particular person, and we did all kind. The best thing I can tell you is I went to a grade school with 1,300 other kids.
Wow.
Yeah, and we had nuns who were certainly influential persons. They had 65 kids in a classroom.
Oh my
I
gosh.
still had 3 different reading groups, 3 different math groups. And I look at our grade school teachers today who complain about having more than 25. And I wonder, where were you back then?
Right. No kidding.
Now, the fact that the nuns were dressed like Darth Vader and had a yardstick was like a lightsaber, it didn't affect us back then because we hadn't seen Star Wars.
Yeah, I got you. I got you.
But they were very effective at keeping discipline, and they were effective at teaching and inspiring. They really were. So probably the nuns, in terms of humans, were the best example for me.
So in high school, we know from just a minute ago, we know that you didn't have chemistry.
No.
But was there a subject in high school that was your favorite subject?
Most of the history ones were very good. The theology ones were confusing because the Vatican Council had just ended and they took away our religion books in junior year and gave us the actual documents of Vatican II. So we got the real stuff. And then years later, when I went to Rome for divinity school, I was taught by some of the people who had written some of those things. And so we got the background info behind it and stuff, which made it come alive a bit more.
Oh, sure.
In high school, I did have a physics course that in senior year high school, they bused us into the local high school. Actually, they station wagon 11 of us in all in one station. And we took physics, and it was a very good physics course. So much so that I was able to pass out a part of college physics because of it.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, it was very good, even though we didn't have an advanced placement thing. And we had one summer, I took a course in biology because we got 6 weeks home during the summer and there wasn't much else you could do. You couldn't get a job very easily at that point. All the other kids had gotten the jobs. So, I mean, I cut grass and stuff, but I took a biology course.
Yeah, that's cool.
So interesting. I had never had any chemistry, and it opened my world.
So your undergrad, your undergrad college, which college did you go to?
I went to St. Louis University in St. Louis, Missouri. It's a Jesuit institution of about 12,000.
Why did you pick there?
Pardon me?
Why did you pick that school?
I didn't. The community told me, you are going there. That's
there you go. Okay. That made it easy.
I didn't have any choice. I couldn't get a scholarship there because they did a 40% tuition reduction for people in the seminary. And I had a National Merit Scholar.
Right.
So it was because we had a good high school. We learned our English well. We learned Spanish well. I only had 2 years of Spanish. And I still speak it fluently because of that.
That's awesome. It sounds like you had an amazing education in high school.
We did. We really did. It didn't seem like it at the time, of course, but it was very good. Of course, we didn't have all the other distractions, and we had lots and lots of classes. So we had Latin, we had English, we had Spanish, we had history, we had algebra, we had religion, we even had something called manual training that they gave us credit for cleaning up the place because we learned how to run buffers and do all the other kinds of things. one of my classmates dropped out and became a janitor someplace and got all the benefits that he needed from the high school. So it
There you
was
go.
a really good high school.
That's awesome. I love it. Okay.
Now it's a home for retarded adults, and we are all told we can come back and take up where we left off anytime we want to and things like that.
There you go. So you go to graduate school. Where do you go to school with graduate school?
Indiana University in Bloomington. Loved it.
Was it a choice? Did you choose that, or
Yeah, that one I had a choice because the committees did just go out. At this point, of course, we were still paying our own tuition.
Yeah.
As a patriot, you're responsible for yourself, but they tell you what you're going to do. So I went to Indiana University for 3 years, got a master's of organic chemistry and a doctorate in synthetic non-metal inorganic.
Wow.
Well, whether it's organic or inorganic, they were explosive.
And you did this, so you pursued that even though you knew you were going to be in the church.
Yes. The hope at that point still, because they were still divesting themselves of these Newman centers on college campuses, the hope was that I would still go back into church and do that kind of work.
Gotcha.
That didn't work out until just a few years ago, where I helped out with the University of Louisville here in Kentucky. But other than that, I've been doing other different kinds of things.
Yeah, you have.
For one thing.
So you get your Ph.D. and your master's, right? And then what do you do?
I went to Rome for divinity school.
Right.
Okay.
How
and
long was that?
I was greeted by the Dominicans there. Chemist, we know how to deal with your kind. We can gather firewood for the courtyard again if you get out of hand. I work with very, very small molecules, 5, 10 atoms, and they blew up. So maybe the firewood wouldn't make it to the fire, depending on how things went for you. We decided we were going to be friends, and it was very good. It was a wonderful experience. I went 1 year to a Jesuit university, the Gregorian, one semester, and switched to the Dominican one because their structure fit with my scientific background a lot better.
Yeah.
Even though they would never admit it.
That's awesome.
And the professors there were fantastic. I was struggling with understanding how the change takes place in transubstantiation in the Eucharist, because it sounded like a chemical thing and it isn't. And I figured it out enough. And finally, one of my professors got 2 of his buddies, one who was the dean of the philosophy school, the other was a full-born professor and stuff, and the 3 of us stood in about a 4x4 closet and discussed this nose to nose for about an hour. Finally, the philosophy dean said, well, you're definitely wrong because you're not Thomistic. You're definitely Catholic. And other places would have suggested I was heretical, and they were not worried about that because I'm a follower of Blessed John Duns Scotus and his way of looking at things rather than St. Thomas Aquinas. And they were kind of rivals at the time, but not exactly. And they're both saints, so it's not a problem in that regard. But it was very good in Rome. I really learned. I went there for 3 reasons. By that point, I had affiliated with the Archdiocese of Louisville, Kentucky. I asked God where he wanted me, and he pointed me here. And then I would find that I really belonged here. So I don't know where my blood family was from.
Right.
It would have been from this area because I'll go places and I'll know things, especially about church things that I have no way of knowing. Like, wasn't the original church building over here? Or isn't there a little cemetery over here? Yeah, there are things that I have a deep resonance with it that I have no way of explaining.
So there's no way to explain that. That's got to be interesting to know that when you're really not supposed to know that, right?
Correct. That may be one of the ways that I connected with the stories that I've written. So that's part of the thing. But nevertheless, in Rome, I went there. I wanted to go there for 3 reasons. 2 of them were good. The third one wasn't quite so good, but it was the most helpful later on, believe it or not. The first one is that I was unsure of the quality of theology instruction in the United States because I had had some bad experiences. And I knew in Rome I'd at least get what the church teaches, whether or not I liked it. I wouldn't
Right.
have to guess what the church teaches. And I got it. And
Yeah.
more than that, I got explanations behind it that really did make it make sense. The second reason was I knew I didn't understand canon law. I knew I understood correct political laws in the United States, and I understood scientific laws, but canon law, I didn't want to just be giving my opinion of something to the parishioners and make things wrong for them.
Right.
So I wanted to go to the atmosphere in which it developed. And I understood that so much so that for the last 30 years, I've been on the Metropolitan Tribunal of the Archdiocese of Louisville as a defender of the bond. So it worked out. The third reason was I kind of wanted to be in the same class with the future bishops and cardinals and stuff of the thing. And then when I became a general in the U.S. Army chaplaincy, my job was in interface with them
Yeah.
because the chief of chaplains didn't want to do that. So he kind of pushed it over to me. And I knew them when we were all classmates together or in the same school. Most
That
of them
worked
were
out.
a year ahead or a year behind. And my lips are sealed about that time back then. But we knew each other. And we
Yeah.
knew each other by nicknames.
Yeah.
And we were bridge partners or things like that.
Yeah.
I ran into one of them, Archbishop Charlie Balvo, who was originally from New York City, is now the apostolic nuncio for most of East Africa. And I ran into him a few years ago and said, Charlie, how have you been? Haven't seen you since our bridge game. And he was delighted to see me as well.
Yeah.
Wasn't just delighted that I called him by his nickname in front of other people, but other than that was so the fact that I knew a number of these people. The last papal election we had, I knew personally 6 of the cardinals that
Wow.
were in that conclave because they were either in school with me or they had been professors that had taught me. And I knew them by name and they still speak to me despite that, things like that.
Yeah.
So good. So that was one of the reasons, and it was a good reason, which was useful much later.
Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and then I was ordained in 78,
Mhm.
was sent to kind of a mid-city parish in Louisville that had a rich heritage, beautiful church, classic Roman. People would think it was Byzantine, but it was really Roman before it carried on the Byzantine structures and stuff. It had marble inlaid with mosaics, which was a particular Roman characteristic I learned in Rome from the church things there. Then I went to 2 years in Lebanon, Kentucky, down where the stories take place. And it was there that the stories started speaking to me. And then since then, I've been sent just about every part of the diocese by the Archbishop at one time or another.
Yeah.
To a year and a half in the LaGrange area, then Valley Station, then Danville, Kentucky, where there's Center College. It's an Ivy League college, but it's in Kentucky. And it's really kind of a cool place. And then from there, 5 years on active duty in the U.S. military and all over the world. And I'll come back to that one. And from there, Springfield, Kentucky, to a rural Black parish. That is an interesting story because we used to have Black Catholics because it was a slave state. Kentucky was a slave state. We had a lot of Catholics in this central part. And they're Black people, wonderful people that were born into slavery and became Catholic because their owners were Catholic and stuff. When emancipation came, one of the people that I was talking to told me that his grandparents, because he's much older than I was, his grandparents deliberately took the slaves, arranged for them to have their own houses and a place to live, place to work, and things like that in town, so that they would still have a very good workforce nearby that knew that they were trustworthy. So a lot of them stayed and still worked there. They got education, and because they were Catholic, they went to Catholic schools until 1929, when the Kentucky passed a law that Black and white students couldn't go to the same school, even private schools together. That was called the Kentucky Day Law. So we tried to form, we got Catholic schools, we got 2 little schools in the same parish.
Right.
Kentucky wouldn't let us do that. But the Third Plenary Council of Baltimore said every parish had to have its school. So we founded another parish in Springfield in
There you
between
go.
white parishes. And basically it was a school for Black Catholics to actually get a good education and the religion and things like that. It was a good school, but then it had a little church built on top, so it fulfilled the legal requirements. And the Kentucky.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.